Yo, what is up and what is good? It's the man with the plan, J Tran, back at it again with another video. Today, we're going to be breaking down every single ability in Madden 24. There's been countless amount of times where I ran into a God Squad and Mutt head-to-head, but they're running the most useless abilities in the game. Abilities are 100% the most important stat in Madden 20. For example, that's why a lot of these limited cards go for so much, because they give discounted abilities to really good abilities. And if you don't really understand like what abilities are good, you might as well just rock the most basic core elite team, honestly. There's like 100 abilities in the game, and I understand it can get a little bit overwhelming. So hopefully with this video, we're gonna rank every ability, throw them in a tier list, and help you guys understand what abilities do what and if they're worth spending AP on. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so you guys see the tier list. This is how the tier system is going to work. S are abilities that you must have on your field. These are tested, they work, and they're just the best abilities in the game. A tier list abilities are very good abilities, and they're good for different schemes and situations, but are very good, and I would highly recommend using these abilities as well. B tier list abilities means these abilities work, but I wouldn't use them unless I had leftover AP and I didn't know what to do with it. C tier list is kind of the same. I would put that in the similar kind of standard, to where if I had extra AP or if I'm trying to do something very specific, I will use the C tier list. D tier list means that the abilities work, but there's really no point in using these abilities. F tier means the ability just doesn't work and it's really not worth even putting on your field at all. The first ability we are going to be covering is Clutch Kicker. Clutch Kicker allows you to not get iced at the end of the game, going for a game-winning field goal or a game-tying field goal. This ability is really good. If you hate the ice kick animation, I would highly recommend using this. But I'm going to show you a stack of abilities you can use that's even better than using Clutch Kicker. The next ability we're going to be covering is Mid-In. I think this ability is very good, and there are a lot of routes that will light up with Mid-In. How the ability works is you get a catch boost plus a little bit sharper route on routes that cut 10 or 20 yards inside the numbers. So for example, if you're running a corner route and the corner route breaks within the numbers, even though it breaks outside the numbers at the end of it, the ability is going to light up. I'm going to put this in the B tier list. If you have extra AP and can get it for a discount, why not use it? The next ability that we are going to be covering is Tank. How Tank works is if your ball carrier has Tank and gets hit stick, he's going to break the tackle a majority of the time. I wouldn't recommend using this ability because we are in a meta where using the strip button is better than using the hit stick. So a lot of players aren't going for hit sticks like they were in previous Maddens. The ability does work, but it's so situational that I wouldn't recommend using it. I'm going to put it in the D tier list. The next ability is going to be Matchup Nightmare. This ability allows the receiver to fry a linebacker that's manned up to him. The ability works, but the thing is that not a lot of people are manning up because zone is the meta, unlike last year. And then on top of that, people aren't just manning up linebackers with dollar and all these other meta defenses. The ability works, but just like Tank, it's situational and I wouldn't recommend using it. All right, Deep In is the next ability. This ability actually is going to be our first F ability. There's really not that many routes where Deep In is going to light up, and it's just not worth having on your field, to be honest. Recuperation is the next ability, and you would think that this ability would be a S tier ability, especially with the fatigue patch that was just dropped by Madden, but this ability actually just doesn't work. The next ability we're going to be covering is Anchored Extender. Anchored Extender allows you to break a sack by a DB the first sack attempt. I think this ability is kind of decent. The break the sack animations this year aren't very good, so sometimes you'll break a sack and they'll lead you to getting sacked anyways. So I wouldn't really recommend using this ability. It works, but if you get one of the rare good break sack animations, it could help, but most of the time you're getting a bad animation. And for that, I'm going to put this in the D tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Outside Shade. Outside Shade, this year, I'm going to put it in the F tier. The way the ability works is your defender is going to get a faster reaction if he's manned up and the receiver makes his cut outside of the numbers. There's not a lot of offenses this year where receivers are outside the numbers anyways to make the cut. So for that, I'm going to put it in the F tier. The next ability we're going to be covering is Fast Break. Fast Break doesn't really work how it was in previous Maddens. Previous Maddens, your quarterback would kind of get a speed boost if he had Fast Break and was running some kind of quarterback designed run. But this year, the way Fast Break works is you kind of break the first tackle attempt. This ability this year isn't that good. And plus, there's not a lot of good quarterback run plays as there were in the previous Madden. And for that, I'm going to put this ability in the F tier list. Lurk Artist is a new ability to Madden 24. This is one of the greatest abilities Madden has dropped. It's a 0 AP ability for almost all of the new linebackers this year. This ability is basically a combination between Lurker and Pick Artist. Many times, like I said, it's a 0 AP ability. If you're going to use a linebacker this year as your user, you have to have this ability. And because of that, I'm going to put this in the S tier. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be Puller Elite. I think this ability is really good, but it's so situational. The only way to make this ability worth it is if you know and you run a lot of plays with a pulling guard that you can put this ability on. And because of that, I'm going to throw this in the D tier list ability, Roaming Deadeye. If you watch my William Perry video, this ability is the reason I was able to make every single throw outside the pocket. It's what David T has coined as blue passing. Even if you don't scramble out of the pocket like I do to throw, this ability is very good. Like I mentioned before, David T is kind of blowing up on Twitch with the blue passing meta. You just take a step outside of your pocket and you're going to be able to throw the perfect pass every single time. I think it's situational though, and it's kind of hard to fit depending on your scheme. A lot of people like set feet lead better. So because of that, I'm going to put this ability in the A tier list. It's very good. Like I said, it depends on your scheme. The next ability we're going to be covering is Fearless. Fearless allows your quarterback to throw, and even if he's under pressure, he's still going to be able to make the throw. The problem is that it's just way too much AP this year. In order to fit another quarterback ability plus Fearless, that means you probably aren't going to have any extra routes with Slot App, Outside Apprentice, or Tight End Apprentice. And because of that, I think the ability is just not good right now. I'm going to put this ability in the C tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Mid Out. This is another route ability. There's just not a lot of routes that really activate on this ability. And because of that, I'm going to be throwing this ability in the D tier list. Mid-zone KO is the next ability. I'm going to throw this ability in the A tier list. I think this ability is very good, and the range of where your knockouts are able to light up and knock the ball out, there's a huge range on it. Sometimes you can get corner routes on it. Sometimes you can get post routes. It pretty much activates on anything besides a flat and a deep corner. Because of the range being so good, I would recommend this ability and put it in the 8th tier list. No Outsiders allows your defender to kind of light up if your opponent is running a stretch or any kind of run that goes to the outside of the offensive line. The ability does work, but it's easily countered. All your opponent has to do is double team your no outsider and it will cancel the ability. Because of that, I'm going to put it in the D tier list. All right, the next ability we are going to be covering is going to be Running Back Apprentice. I think this ability is an A tier list. A lot of the bunch meta and the trips tight end meta uses a Running Back Apprentice because it has one of the best 2 routes for a running back, the Texas route and then the table route. And these routes cut really fast and can kind of bail you out and are very good checkdowns. Gift Wrap is the next ability, and I'm going to put this ability in the S tier list. I think for 1 AP, sometimes it's 0 AP, it's definitely worth it. For a while, you couldn't even catch a wide open pass without having gift wrapped on your quarterback. This ability, however, this year kind of helps you with the one-on-one ags like high balls or just throwing it into like one-on-one coverage. You'll come down with the 50-50 balls more often than not. Route Tech is the next ability we're going to be talking about. This ability is like a 4 AP ability. I think the ability, it definitely works on pretty much every single route. Problem is it's 4 AP ability. Currently, I'm using it on my out of position Deion Sanders that gets it as an X factor. So I'm basically able to use Route Tech for 0 AP. Without that, I probably wouldn't use it unless I had a lot of extra leftover AP. The next ability we're going to be covering is Bulldozer. Bulldozer this year doesn't work that well. It's kind of like Tank. So because of that, I'm going to put this ability in the D tier list. Short Route KO is the next ability on our list. I'm going to put this ability in the F tier list. But even if it did work, the meta, like I said before in the video, is more of a zone meta. There's not a lot of man-to-man being played this year. So a lot of these route KOs, the man-to-man ones, are going to be listed a lot lower compared to if I made this video last year in Madden 23. Gunslinger is the next ability, and this is an S tier ability. This makes a lot of unusable releases usable because it allows the quarterback to throw the ball faster so that they don't get a crazy wind-up animation to where you see your receiver, you click the button to throw the ball, but you get a bad animation where he has to cock the ball back all the way just to throw it. Gunslinger will make the release a little bit faster, and because of that, it's an S tier ability. The next ability we're going to be talking about is Third Down Threat. This is a new ability to Madden 24, but the thing is, this ability is just way too situational. It only lights up on third down, but it kind of works like a double me whenever it is third down. I think the ability is like kind of cool, but like I said, it's just way too situational and way too costly on AP. I'm going to throw this ability in the D tier list where the ability works, but it just costs way too much to use. The next ability we're going to be talking about is Deep Out KO. This ability right here, besides Lurk Artist, is the best ability in the game. A lot of the meta is deep corner routes, crossing routes, and sometimes Deep Out will light up on like a deep post if they don't throw it correctly. So because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the S tier list. The ability we're going to be talking about is Backfield Master. What Backfield Master is this ability is basically a combination of Matchup Nightmare, Route Tech, and Running Back Apprentice. The only problem with this ability is that it costs 4 AP just to use it, and because of that, I just don't think it's worth it unless you run a very throw to the running back heavy scheme. I'm going to throw this ability in the B tier list where it's very good, but it just costs too much AP to use. The next ability we are going to be covering is Precision Kicker. Precision Kicker allows you to see the full arc of the kick. It's kind of like playing on All Pro when you kick and you can see the meter. That's what Precision Kicker does for you. For this, I'm going to put this ability in the A tier list. This is part of the stack that I was talking about earlier. Even when you're iced, you're able to see the full vision of the kick arc. Because of that, I'm going to put this ability in the A tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Deep Route KO. This is like short route KO, but this is for all the deeper routes. Like I've been saying, the man meta is kind of dead in Madden 24, but this ability does work. And with the offensive meta being deep corners, post, and crossing route, I'm going to put this ability in the B tier list where it works. But the thing is, how often are you actually going to be manning up this player with Deep Route KO? I'm going to be putting this ability in the C tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Run Off Elite. This ability just doesn't work. It might have worked if it was a man meta, like I've been saying, but it just doesn't work this year. I'm going to be putting this ability in the F tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be Unpredictable. Unpredictable, when it does work, the very few times it does work in a game, it's a really cool animation for your D lineman. But the thing is that you'll probably get this animation one time out of like every 100 snaps or something. So it's just definitely not worth it at all for any AP. Because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. One step ahead was ability that was very good last year in Madden 23. This year, the ability is not as good. And like I keep saying, zone meta over man meta this year. Because of that, I'm going to put this ability next to Deep Route KO in the C tier list, where the ability does work, but it's just not really worth spending Out My Way is an ability that works, but it's just not really worth spending AP on at all. So I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. Honorary Lineman is the next ability. We're going to be putting this ability in the D tier list, where the ability works, but it's just really not worth the AP. Even if you run the ball every single down, this ability is very situational, and I don't think it's really worth AP. Deflator is another ability that we're going to be covering. I think the ability does work, but unless you have 11 deflators out there consistently fatiguing your opponent's offense, I just don't think it's worth the AP, because it depends on one defender to make the tackle to mess with the fatigue on the offense. Film Study is the next ability we're going to be covering, and this ability is going to be a C tier list ability for me. It's a 4 AP ability on defense, and how it works is if your opponent runs the same play back to back, you're going to be able to see their play art. Thing is that the meta is pretty much the same, so you can kind of predict what your opponent is going to do anyways. And even if you haven't been able to stop them the whole entire game, being able to see what your opponent is doing is not really going to be as useful as you would think it would be. So I'm going to put this ability in the C tier list. It works, but spending 4 AP is just not worth it in my opinion. Short End is the next ability, and out of all the route tech type abilities, I think this ability is probably the best one next to route tech. You can get it for pretty cheap now. I think 3 or 2 AP. I think this is an A tier list ability. The ability will light up on pretty much every single route. Like, there's so many routes where you wouldn't think Short End would light up, but it does. I'm gonna put this ability in the A tier list. The next ability is going to be Inside Stuff. This is like no outsiders, but it stops like inside zones, dives. I think this ability is better than no outsiders, especially if you're running like a 4-3 type defense and you can have 2 defensive tackles, where this ability is also starting to get discounted, so it's 1 AP. And defensive AP just jumped up to, I think, 11 AP. So if you can fit 2 outsiders for 1 AP each, I think it might be kind of worth it. It's definitely better than no outsiders. It's one of the abilities, if you have extra AP and you want to spend it on no outsiders, I would recommend probably doing that. It can get canceled out just like no outsiders, but like I was saying, if you're running a 4-3 style defense, 2 inside stuffs, I think this ability can be pretty good, because you can only cancel out 1 of them. The next ability is going to be Edge Threat. If you played Madden 23, you knew this ability went crazy, especially in formations like nickel normal last year. Pretty much completely nerfed this ability. It works sometimes situationally, you'll see it light up. It's kind of like any other pass rush abilities in my opinion this year. When it works, it's really good, but it hardly works. So I'm going to put this ability in the D tier list. The next ability we're going to be looking at is going to be Red Zone Deadeye, where your quarterback throws accurate passes when you're inside the red zone. I think this ability is just too situational. The ability definitely works, but it's just not worth the AP in my opinion. And because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. Acrobat is the next ability. This is a C tier list ability where the ability works, it's good, but it's just too much AP at this time. And unless you've taken care of all the S tier abilities, the A tier list and the B tier list, that's when I would maybe use it. The ability is good, it just costs way too much. No Look Deadeye, just like Red Zone Deadeye, is going to be a D tier list ability. It definitely works. It's just way too situational and just not worth the AP in order to use this ability. Medium Route KO, I think, is worse than Deep Route KO. The ability works, like I said, but it's just not really worth it this year. I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list ability. Reach For It is the next ability. This is an ability I see a lot in MUT head-to-head. This ability is not that good. Honestly, you're not going to get any crazy animations where you're going to reach an extra 1 yard or 2 yards like you did maybe last year. This is an F tier list ability. I wouldn't recommend using this ability at all. Outside Apprentice is the next ability. I'm going to be putting this ability in the B tier list simply because most meta offenses do not use Outside Apprentice. It's significantly worse than Running Back Apprentice and Slot Apprentice as far as value to different offenses. But situationally, if you can find cool routes that you like with it, I could see it being kind of useful. Because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the B tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Return Man. Return Man, I'm going to put in the C tier list, where the ability definitely works, but it's just worth too much AP. However, I'm going to say that Deion Sanders, like I mentioned before, gets this ability for 0 AP. The ability is very good though. How it works this year is that the first tackler try to attempt to tackle your Return Man, your Return Man is just going to shed the tackle off. So the ability could be very good. Unless you get it for 0 AP, however, or have a lot of leftover AP, I wouldn't recommend using it. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be On the Ball. This ability is another ability I actually see very often in MUT head-to-head. I don't think this ability is very good at all, and it's definitely not worth spending AP on. I'm going to put this ability in the F tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Dashing Deadeye. I think this ability can be good. The ability definitely works, but if you're going to be running out of the pocket and throwing on the run, Roaming Deadeye is actually a way better ability. You can kind of glitch Roaming Deadeye by, even if you're scrambling out of the pocket right before you throw to the receiver and click the button, let go of turbo, and you're going to get the perfect pass every time. Also, Dashing Deadeye is limited to passes under 40 yards. And I just don't think it's worth it, even if you're going to run a rollout offense. And because of that, I'm going to put this ability in the D tier list. Double or Nothing is the next ability. I've been testing this ability on Nick Bosa because he gets it for 1 AP. I hardly ever see this ability light up, but it definitely lights up more than Unpredictable and all of the other pass rush chems that I covered. I'm gonna put this ability in the C tier list. I think the ability works better than the other pass rush chems, and just comparing to other pass rush chems, I'll put this ability at the top of that. So I'll put it in the C tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be Hot Route Master. This is an A tier list ability. A lot of offenses can get away with just running one slot app and one tight end app and maybe a running back app. This is traditionally a 4 AP ability, and during that time where you have to spend 4 AP, in certain offenses you really needed only to spend 3 AP. The ability is good, but with Tua and Jordan Love having this ability discounted to 2 AP, I think this ability is very good. I'm gonna put it in the A tier list ability. It's basically a combination of slot app, tight end app, running back app, and outside apprentice with your quarterback. The next ability we're going to be covering is Jukebox. If you know how to use Jukebox, I think this is one of the better abilities this year. But with juking being so good anyways, to get good jukes, it's really a weight requirement. There's a weight threshold that if your running back or receiver is under this threshold, he'll get the really good jukes. It's definitely not needed, but if you have extra AP and you know how to use it, this is an A tier list ability. Edge Protector is the next ability. I think all the O-line abilities this year honestly aren't very good. They kind of work, but it's just really not worth using for the AP. And because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. Armbar is another running back ability that they've nerfed to the ground. This ability was like the best ability in Madden 20, but they really nerfed it. It like kind of works, but really not worth using, honestly. So because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. Defensive Rally is another pass rush chem, and I'm going to put this ability in the D tier list. Really not worth using your AP on, but the ability does still technically work. Quick Draw is the next ability we're going to be covering, and I'm going to put this ability in the D tier list. If you're trying to throw the ball away when there's pressure coming, it works, but it's just really not worth using this year. I'm putting this ability in the D tier list. Lurker is the next ability we are going to be covering. I'm putting this ability in the D tier list. It might be higher, but we have Lurk Artists for way less AP, 0 or 1 AP compared to 2 AP for Lurker, and it's just not really worth using this year. If you're going to put it on a DB, there's a lot of DBs that get discounted pick artists, which is better than using Lurker. So because of that, I'm putting in the D tier list because it does work, but just not worth using. Deep in KO is the next KO that we're going to be covering. This is an A tier list ability. It's not as good as deep out KO, but it's still very good. A lot of players are using 2 deep outs and 2 deep ins right now. It's very hard to throw the ball unless you're able to manipulate these KOs. Deep in is the next ability that I'm putting in the A tier list because after you have your 2 deep outs, I would highly recommend getting 2 deep ins somewhere on your field. The next ability we're going to be covering is flat zone KO. Personally, I'm putting this ability in the C tier list where it's just too much AP. I know you can get it discounted, but there are definitely more important things to put on your field on the defensive side as far as AP goes. I would rank it deep out, then deep in, and then if you have extra AP, putting mid zone KOs out there. Mid zone covers way more than the flat zone KOs does. Personally, I'm putting flat zone on C tier unless you can get it for like 0 AP or something. Second wind, I'm putting this ability in the D tier list. It definitely works, just not worth your AP. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be Crusher. Crusher is very similar to Deflator. The ability works, just not worth the AP. Next is going to be Slot App. I think Slot App is definitely an A tier list ability, especially with how pros are countering the double Mabel concept this year. Having a deep corner and then a slot app corner route definitely makes defense hard, especially if all they run is double Mabel. I think slot app is a very good ability. The post is very good. The crosshair is kind of mid. The corner routes are also very good. So because of this, this is an A tier list ability. Short out elite is kind of similar to mid out elite where the ability works, but the routes that activate on it are very few that it's really not worth using this year. Because of that, we're throwing this in the D tier list. The next is red zone threat where your receiver kind of feels like he gets double me in the red zone. It's very similar to third down threat. It's too situational for me and I think it costs way too much AP to use at this time. Because of that, I'm throwing this in the D tier list. Protected is the next ability we're going to be covering. This is an F tier list ability. The ability doesn't really work. Because of that, it's going to be in the F tier. The next ability we're going to be covering is Set Feet Lead. This is an S tier list ability. Like I said, with the zone meta being the meta this year, this ability basically allows the ball to get to your receiver faster than without having it on. This is definitely an S tier ability, especially if you're throwing on the break or you need to beat a KO and throw it before the KO can get there. This is definitely an S tier list ability. The next ability we're going to be covering is Agile Extender. Agile Extender is pretty much the same thing as Anchored Extender. This is a D tier list ability. It works, but it's just not worth AP. Tight End Apprentice is the next apprentice we are going to be covering. This is an A tier list ability. It's up there with Slot App and Running Back App, and it's better than Outside Apprentice. This is an A tier list ability. Next ability we're going to be covering is Pick Artist. Pick Artist is a tier list ability in my opinion, especially if you can get it for 0 AP. It kind of works like Lurk Artist. It's a worse version of Lurk Artist and you can get it for 0 AP on a lot of players right now. Because of that, I'm putting this in the A tier list. The next ability we're going to be covering is Natural Talent. Natural Talent is an F tier list ability. It just doesn't work, not worth putting on your offensive lineman at all. Because of that, it's an F tier list ability. Slotomatic is very similar to Route Technician on the way it works. If your player is in the slot, I think this is a B tier list ability. It is pretty good, just kind of if you had leftover AP and you wanted to throw it on your slot receiver, I would throw it on your slot receiver, but it's just really not A tier or S tier. It doesn't really move the needle that much. The next ability we're going to be covering is going to be Zen Kicker. This is part of the other part of the stack I was talking about. This allows you to have a slow kick meter on kicks that are like 40 yards and higher. Because of that, I'm putting this ability in the A tier list. Long range Deadeye is similar to no look Deadeye and red zone Deadeye. The ability works, but it's just way too situational. And unless you're bombing your opponent every single play, it's really just not worth having. It's going to be a D tier list ability. Stonewall this year lights up consistently and all the time, but the ability actually does nothing. It's a broken ability and it's an F tier list ability. I don't think this ability is very good at all. All Day is another O-line ability. This one actually works, but it's really not worth the AP at all. So because of that, I'm going to be putting this ability in the D tier list. Identifier is going to be the next ability we're covering. I'm putting this ability in the B tier list, especially if you're running non-meta type offenses, throwing RPOs, throwing motion swings and stuff. So if your opponent is creeping on a slot DB or the outside DB trying to lurk you, you could see that. And instead of throwing the RPO, you could just run the ball. Because of that, it has a lot of uses. Very situational though. So because of that, it's a B tier list ability. The next ability we're covering is going to be Lumberjack. And just like Crusher and Deflator, unless you have 11 out there, I don't think it's really worth it. The ability does work, however, but it's just not worth it unless you have a bunch of Lumberjacks out there that are consistently getting hits. Human Joystick is another running back ability like I talked about with Armbar, where they just nerfed. It was very good in old gen, but because of the movement in next gen, Human Joystick is just not very good at all. It does light up, it does kind of work, but it's just not worth using your AP on. Because of that, this is a D tier list ability. Tip Drill is a D tier list ability. The reasoning is very similar to a lot of these other abilities in the D tier list, where the abilities do work. It's just so situational that it just doesn't really make sense to have these abilities out there. For example, you can have pick artists out there where they will still count, they're still able to catch tip drill type interceptions. There's more uses with pick artists than there is tip drill. The next ability is going to be Indoor Baller. This ability does work. It does help you activate your X factors inside of a dome a little bit quicker, but it's just really not worth it. And in MUT right now, there's already pre-lit X Factors, and because of that, I don't think Indoor Baller is worth it. Under Pressure is the next ability. I'm putting this ability in the C tier list. It does definitely work, but the thing is, it just costs way too much AP at this point in the game to be worth it. If you want to use it, it does work, however. I think it's a good ability once it starts getting discounted. The last ability we're going to be covering is Sideline Deadeye. Sideline Deadeye, like Long Range Deadeye, like No Look Deadeye, like Red Zone Deadeye, is just too situational. I think this ability is better than those, but I just still think it's not worth having, considering you can use Roaming Deadeye or Set Feet Lead. It's just not really worth using at this time. That concludes our video for today. Hopefully this video helps you decide which abilities are worth spending your AP on. If it did help you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And with that, I'm out.